Today I'll be discussing a topic that many women steer far clear from, and it's something that I avoided for way too long in my journey as well, and that is bulking. So I'm just starting a new bulking phase now, and that's why I really want to clear the air, bust any myths that there may be around bulking, and explain how you can do it yourself. So what is bulking? Essentially, I am intentionally entering a calorie surplus, which is where I'm eating more calories than what I'm burning with the goal of gaining muscle. Now, for many of you, I know this is a question I had too, is doesn't that mean, more calories that leads to fat gain? Well, the answer is yes, but it's a little more complicated than that. We can really control how much fat versus muscle we gain by adding a stimulus, aka resistance training. Now, someone who's eating more calories than they need that isn't lifting weights, yeah, they're gonna gain 100% fat. There's no reason for them to gain muscle. But if we are channeling that extra fuel to really maximize our weightlifting sessions, then we're gonna have a little bit of a different story. Just a quick tip, I personally like to use the term growth phase or muscle building phase a lot more than I like to refer to this as bulking. I think that probably just comes from societal norms around building muscle. A lot of women come to me saying that they want to, get toned but not get bulky. So I think if this is something that bothers you, not referring to this phase as a bulking phase, actually is a little bit more productive. I found that's the case for me. So if that kind of helps you, then by all means, let's start using those phrases instead. So why is a growth phase important, especially for women? For me, the biggest thing is just taking a break from the dieting. I think our society really hammers down that we need to be our smallest, constantly, reaching for the next magic diet, and kind of like taking a break from this is just breath of fresh air. This kind of takes the pressure off of feeling like you need to be starving yourself all the time, and instead can channel your energy into other pursuits, whether it's enjoying more social time, taking immersing yourself in more hobbies. I think this takes the pressure off and really does give a really good way to shift your energy. Also, just confidence. Being able to show yourself what your body can do far beyond just aesthetics is so empowering. Being able to focus on numbers outside of the scale, I think, is just, again, a really nice change of pace and shift in your priorities. Probably should have started with this one, but for obvious reasons, muscle growth. Many people will, be in that diet mindset where they're looking to shed fat, but if you don't have any muscle to reveal, that's when people kind of result in that skinny fat outcome that may not necessarily be what they're looking for. So making sure that you build the muscle first is crucial if you have certain body comp goals. And with more muscle comes a boosted metabolism. Muscle is a more metabolically demanding tissue than fat. So you will ultimately find yourself being able to consume more and still maintain a lower weight without gaining, because more muscle is burning more calories at rest for you. Next is strength and performance. Obviously, when we're in this building phase, our performance in the gym is going to improve as we're fueling to really maximize our sessions. But also in the long term, with that increased muscle mass, we have reduced risk for injury, and that's why you may even have heard more so recently, people have been referring to muscle mass as the longevity organ. And finally, hormonal health. Having adequate calories will ultimately just result in greater well-being, assuming that we are going about this phase properly. And that's a great segue for me to actually now discuss how we can go about this phase properly. So there's two types of bulking you may be familiar with if you've heard this term before. Essentially, we have clean bulking and dirty bulking. So clean bulking is a more gradual, thoughtful approach to a surplus where we're still focusing on whole foods, we are incrementally upping our calories as needed, but we are going to see a slower rate of weight gain versus dirty bulking tends to be a more all-in approach where we're kind of stuffing ourselves, not a whole lot of method to the madness, not as much priority on quality of foods. We're just focusing on that scale weight going up. So this is a little bit more of a aggressive approach. So as you may have guessed, I take a more clean bulking approach to the build phase. So what does it look like for me? As I've hinted at, you're gonna wanna be in a calorie surplus. So essentially what I would do is, first, we wanna know what maintenance is. We need to know what we're working with. So to find maintenance, assuming that your scale weight isn't fluctuating too much, we're staying relatively stable, we want to kind of get a 7-day average of what it is that you are consuming. So track calories for about a week, get a baseline, and then what we'll want to do is add to that. So typically I like to go in a more gradual approach, kind of test the waters, see how it feels, especially if you're someone who's kind of reluctant to start. I would maybe even just add 100, 200 calories to what you're already working with. So it shouldn't be anything too crazy, and then that way you can see how your body reacts. Once you're relatively stable for about 2 weeks, that's when you're gonna wanna up the calories again. Now, quick note, I understand everyone kind of has their own relationship with, maybe tracking, using a scale for food. If that's something that you don't like, that's okay. It's possible to enter a surplus without. You're just gonna want to maybe have more regular meals in terms of what you're eating, not having something different every day. That way you can more manipulate portion sizes. And, for example, if you have rice at lunch every day, you might just increase the amount of that serving of rice to make sure that you're gradually eating a little bit more as you progress through your growth phase. Personally, I like to track when I have more targeted goals like a growth phase, because that way I just have more complete data to go off of, and I can kind of minimize the amount of time I'm in that phase by kind of approaching it a little more efficiently, and can have a better idea of what it is that I'm eating, so that when I need to manipulate it, I can feel like I'm making more sound decisions versus kind of just guessing at it. So next question I typically get around nutrition is protein. What I'd advise is aiming for anywhere between 0.8 and 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So say you weigh 130 pounds, I would aim for around 130 grams of protein every day. And then from there, depending on how many meals or snacks you eat a day, I typically divide that number just to get a better idea of how to achieve that goal. When adjusting upward for calories, say your weight's been the same for the past couple of weeks, so you've deemed it necessary to increase your total caloric intake per day. Typically, I'll leave protein the same and decide whether or not I want to add carbs or fat. Typically for fat, especially with women, this is important for hormonal health, is you'll want to make sure that it composes about 25 to 30% of your daily calories. If you're anything less, that may be what you want to toggle first. Otherwise, I like adding carbs just because it provides extra energy for those workouts. So really up to you as you progress through your surplus, whether or not you need to adjust, and based on preferences, where you'd like to increase. A few other tips I wanted to mention along with nutrition is, one, really making sure that you're spreading those meals out throughout the day, especially if we're increasing calories. Some people may find it difficult to actually meet those higher calorie numbers. So by spreading it equally throughout the day, that kind of gives your body time to digest, rather than if we're skipping breakfast and only having a couple of meals, it's going to fill you up a lot more. So also thinking about more calorie-dense foods, which would be like nuts and seeds, avocados, maybe fattier cuts of meat and fish. That's going to also help meet that calorie goal without necessarily like overstuffing your stomach and causing more bloating. And then lastly, if it works with your routine, and I say if because it doesn't work with mine. I typically work out fasted because I work out first thing in the morning. But if you are working out later in the day, making sure you really structure your meals around it so that you can go into that workout feeling fueled. And again, the goal here is to really fuel for those workouts so that you can make the most of them towards building muscle. So if you're not starving and you're actually feeling energized for the workout, that'll go a long way. Now, the fun part, let's talk about training. Strength training is a non-negotiable for being in a muscle building phase. Without it, we're going to gain fat. So having that stimulus to your muscles is what's going to point you down the path of muscle gain versus fat gain. So I'd typically advise someone in this phase to be lifting about 3 to 5 times a week. Recovery is also important, so you do want to make sure that you at least have 2 days in there where you aren't doing anything, so you're actually allowing your body the time to recover and build that muscle. In terms of training structure, it really doesn't change a whole lot from what you're doing when you're, say, in a deficit or even maintenance. I'm still working on the same training program I was a week ago when I wasn't in this build phase. Really, what you're going to want to focus on is progressive overload. The way that I make sure I'm doing this is by having a workout log where I'm actually tracking my lifts week in and week out. And I'm comparing when I'm in the gym, I'm really making a point to kind of look back the week before, see what I was doing, and making sure that I'm making those incremental improvements to really confirm that I am, accomplishing what I'm set out to do. So whether it's adding weight, doing more reps, maybe adding in a drop set to get more volume, time under tension, there's so many ways to make sure that you are achieving that progressive overload. As long as we are making sure and holding ourselves accountable that we are doing that, then we're gonna set ourselves up for a successful growth season. Now, I'll typically follow the same plan for around 8 to 12 weeks, so it's not necessary, and I wouldn't advise switching up what you're doing every week. This just doesn't really allow you to have the information you need to ensure that you are tracking along your goals. And then cardio, I actually do still incorporate cardio about 4 times a week. And this is because heart health is still important, whether you're going through a weight loss phase or trying to gain muscle. Cardio is still important. Typically, I'll still keep it to the minimum just because then it can also be a good tool as we re-enter, say, a weight loss phase. So we don't want to be expending too much because also this is going to require more calories to achieve a growth of muscle. So really kind of being mindful of how you're incorporating cardio, but I wouldn't completely ignore it either. So how do we track our progress during a growth phase? Well, I'd still advise weighing yourself just so that you can directionally see where you're going, whether or not we need to toggle the calories we're eating, but also, just assess the pace of gain to make sure that we aren't gaining too quickly. Other things that will give you an idea for progress could be taking body measurements, waist, hips, even thighs and biceps, just to kind of see the growth that we're experiencing. Also just judging how your clothes are fitting, that can be a good way to see. I also like taking photos. It may feel uncomfortable, but there are a lot of changes that happen that you really don't notice unless you're taking photos. So I'd highly encourage that as well, just so you can kind of see how things are developing throughout time. And as I mentioned, I like to keep a workout log. That way we see our progress, not just on our bodies, but also in our strength. I think this is a great tool, especially as we maybe face a little bit of discomfort gaining weight, especially as women. I think we're often told that that's not necessarily the goal that we're going after. So having that logbook that shows that your performance really is improving can be a helpful way to kind of power you through any discomfort that you do experience by the change in the scale. And some tips as you go through a muscle building phase, I'd say number 1 is just be patient. Muscle takes a while to grow, so you want to go in committing to at least 3 to 4 months of a growth phase. you really want to kind of set that timeline for yourself so you know that there's an end in sight, but also knowing that you're committing to this time. You can't just pull out after 1 week of maybe feeling a little bit bloated and uncomfortable. And in terms of pace of gain, I would say targeting around anywhere between 0.8 and 2% body weight per month. That's usually a good target to make sure that you're putting on the weight while also not putting on too much, and minimizing the amount of fat that's gained, so that when we do enter a deficit, it can be for shorter and we'll have more muscle on our bodies than fat. And lastly, just dealing with the mental barriers. I think the biggest thing, especially for women, is just dealing with the discomfort of knowing that your body weight is going to go up. So really just mentally preparing, setting that as the goal, knowing that's the goal and that's what's gonna happen, I think kind of just helps accept that reality a little bit more. Also finding ways to navigate any, just more difficult body image days, whether it's having clothes that fit and feel good for your body, that you don't feel maybe are too exposing when you're not necessarily feeling as confident with yourself. Really lean into those performance goals, whether it's you want to improve your 1 rep max and deadlift, or whatever lift it might be that you're focusing on. I think that is a really good way to shift your focus from weight to more performance-based goals, at least for the time being. I think that can be very helpful. Finding hobbies and just other outlets, I think, can be helpful in terms of realizing that with more energy you may have just more capacity to be with friends and be social and enjoy things that maybe, I guess, a little bit more straining on your goals when you have a lower calorie target. So kind of focusing on the positive. I know it's easier said than done. Just know it's temporary. You can go through, however many weeks that you have set for your growth phase, and knowing that you'll enter a deficit at that point, knowing that that's the ultimate path that you're taking, just enjoying the time that you have to eat more food and have fun in the kitchen. As I mentioned, I'm just entering my growth phase now, so that's going to be my focus for the next several months. So I'll be sharing, tips and tricks and, other thoughts that come up throughout this phase. But please let me know if there's anything that would be helpful for me to expand upon in my growth phase for you. But otherwise, thank you for watching this video to its end, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for the next video.